We're here trying to locate an Australasian bittern, so unlikely to see it, but more likely to hear a bird calling in this wetland. They have a very mottled plumage and they tend to stand very still and erect in the wetland, when they're aware that there are people around. So they just blend into the sedges. Their colouring makes them quite cryptic. If you manage to catch a glimpse of one moving around, they're quite stealthy. They're like stealth predators. They climb over the beds of reeds and stand still while they're looking for prey to move in front of them. So they're not moving a lot above the vegetation. Yeah. They're very beautiful birds, very big and beautiful. And there's actually not very many of them left. So, we're looking at perhaps 100 to 150 individuals in Western Australia and similarly small numbers elsewhere. In Western Australia, you can certainly see, the impact that clearing for agriculture's had. The loss of these wetlands as they've been cleared for grazing and other agricultural practices, but also the loss through the dryland salinity and the changing water tables. So, that's the restriction of suitable habitat for them for breeding has been a major issue. Losing the bittern means that we've lost the species that tells us that our wetland ecosystems are healthy. The bitterns are at the top of the food chain in the wetlands. The fact that we don't see them and hear them doesn't mean that they're not important. And, they're a sign that these wetland systems that support huge diversity of different birds and also mammals, freshwater fish, crustaceans are actually in a little bit of strife.
My camera down at the swamp, I have it set up, and I've been trying to get the bittern for a long time now to try and get him walking past it, and every time I move the camera, he'll always be just where I had the camera that following day. I was so excited when I got him on the camera. It's taken a long time. But next I'd really like to get two of them going past together or even eating a frog or something, so I'm hoping that might happen. On the camera I've also got lots of footage of foxes walking through, even up to their chest deep water. They'd be hunting for the bitterns and even their nest of their eggs, so it's really disturbing that there's a lot of foxes around here. We dropped a bit of tin in the treehouse once and it just made a thunder noise, and you could just see two bitterns pop their heads up and just have a look what we were doing and watching us. There's something poking its head up. I think that might be him. People say they're very camouflaged, which they are, but once you know what they look like, they're pretty easy to see. We have found a nest, but that was a long time ago now. And I'd really like them to feel safe enough to nest in our swamp. The development that's happening in not our swamp, the swamp over there, it's just a little bit too close to the swamp for the bitterns because it'll be noisy and there'll be cars and lights. And if that does go ahead as close as it is, our bitterns feed between both the swamps, so if they're not happy to be in there, knowing that that's their extra food source, then there's a good chance that they won't come back to ours because they're not quite happy that they don't have the two swamps to feed between. And then we won't get the bittern and their numbers will just keep decreasing, because if another swamp goes, then that's another 2 or 3 bitterns gone because they've lost their habitat. We need our wetlands, we need our bush, we need our lakes and our rivers, because if we just bank up houses side by side each other, then we're not going to have any habitats for animals. And when animals die out, well, what else are we going to have to eat, to watch, to look after? And it's just going to all turn pear-shaped.
Alteration of hydrology to service agriculture through irrigation and dams has really changed the landscape and the natural wetting and drying processes, which bitterns and a lot of wetland birds rely on to really supercharge those systems and keep them productive. So these same areas, which are now quite productive for agriculture, we're interested to get back in there where the water is still lying and find out what's happening with bitterns. 15 years ago, we really took a close look when anecdotally a lot of the data showed us that the bitterns were declining at quite a drastic rate, both at reporting rates, numbers, but also in their distribution. So on the back of that, we put in a submission and got the bird listed as endangered. And now we're in this strange position where we've got a bird which is highly cryptic, very hard to find, and we're building a picture of what this bird requires, what it doesn't like, and how we can seek to ameliorate the damage that we've done through altering its landscape so much. Being a cryptic bird, we have to sort of employ some pretty novel tactics. We can't just rely on rocking up to a wetland and seeing bitterns. So we use stuff like audio recorders. We've got the luxury that male bitterns during summer, they boom, and these amazing deep guttural noises can be heard for kilometres on a still night. But same time, we can't be at every wetland at once. So using audio recorders, we can let them do the work for us. And then we process that data and get an idea of where birds are, how many there are, and whether they're attempting to breed. And by using these guys and setting up an array throughout an agricultural landscape like this, we can help unlock the mysteries of this highly threatened and highly cryptic bird.
this is basically the time of night I normally come around and check my water and just adjust a few boards. The minute the water goes on, it's unbelievable. You come here just on dark and you can't hear yourself think. There's just frogs and ducks, every other type of bird and wildlife. It just attracts them. Well, basically we're trying to mimic a wetland, and the bitterns, they seem to come every year, and hasn't changed. They always come back to the rice paddocks, and it's amazing. Yeah, I suppose I've known about them ever since I can remember. I was probably virtually born on a rice farm, and my father used to take me around when I was basically 6 years old. And you'd always hear them, but you'd never see them. And they'd go right out in the middle of the bays, and you'd hear the male booming. It just echoes for miles. You know, you'll hear from one end of the farm to the other, and it's amazing. It's one of those things you've got to experience to really appreciate it. Well, you don't see enough of them to really. That's the problem. They are a dying breed unless we get onto it. Simple as that. Until I really got into the program, I didn't realise how endangered they were, and every time there's a chick born and it's raised in a rice field, well, you're saving an endangered species, I suppose. I've been in a paddock where I've drained it, and you kind of walk and to check, if the rice is ripening and that, and you'll see the young ones lift and fly off, and they're virtually ready, to leave the nest, and that's when you know you've, done right. I think most farmers, they don't go out to destroy a habitat. They don't, like the rice industry's probably got a bad name, but it's on those drought years when you had one paddock, it'd be just teeming with wildlife, and people don't realise that everywhere's dry, and there's an odd paddock here and there of rice, and it's just teeming with wildlife. I hope I can continue to grow rice, because I know at the end of the season there's more bitterns than there was at the start. They are a rare bird, but they're a beautiful bird. So I'm always on the lookout for one now. It's like finding a little bit of gold.
As traditional owners and as budgerim rangers, we're trying to get the landscape back to its original state, or as close as we can get it back to its original state. Since colonisation and settlement within the area, through those European farming practices and their water regimes has changed the landscape, so much. And previous to our acquisition of the site, it was ecologically quite depleted. It's amazing what you can achieve. I mean, within a short amount of time, when we start to take stock off an area, we do quite a lot of revegetation of plants. Also maintain water within the seasonal wetlands here for longer. So we've sandbagged a couple of major European drains on site here. Utilising fire as a tool obviously is quite important, particularly with the the Phragmites vegetation here. We put fire through this vegetation to clear out that biomass. The bittern really relies on clearing it out to give it better movement through the vegetation, so gives it a better chance to breed and nest and also forage. By clearing out the waterways and creating habitat for the bittern, we're also creating really important habitat for other species as well. Caring for country and looking after country is really paramount to who we are as Gunditjmara, and again to visually see country coming back to life. You know, hear the frogs calling, hear the birds calling, see our plant species growing around the wetlands is kind of reassurance and really highlights again that obligation. You know, we have a responsibility, and to see things like the bittern, or hear the bittern coming back into the land is an indication we're on the right track and fulfilling those responsibilities.
I've been coming out here for 4 years since it was handed over to the traditional owners, the Nari Nari. And so I've seen it go from pretty agricultural setting where it'd been quite heavily used in the past to where it is now flourishing with 3 years of consistent watering across the wetlands. So it's been huge changes, and it's been mind-blowing to me just what has happened in such a short period of time. I've seen lots of bare ground go from just expanses of brown to now full of life and birds and water and lignum and kumbungi. Like it's pretty astounding. There's pretty patchy records of Australasian bitterns out at this site, but since Nari Nari has been managing the property, we've seen a huge increase. So going from 4 in the first year I was doing monitoring to 16 the next year, and then to over 40 in the third year. So, and that's a product of just everything increasing. Like bitterns are a great indicator for the whole system. So if we've got 10 times the amount of bitterns, we've got 10 times the amount of habitat, we've got 10 times the amount of fish and frogs and all the things that they're eating. So they're a really great species to monitor because they've got this great call and we can see if they're present, but really they're just an indicator of a healthy ecosystem, and we should be valuing the whole thing. Places out west, like at Gaini, don't receive a lot of rainfall, so are reliant on flows from upstream, and that's been heavily disrupted since colonisation. So environmental water is integral. That's what these places hinge on, is the delivery of environmental water and the proper management of environmental water, because wetlands are complex and they require the appropriate timing of water and extent and duration to, you know, bring it back to a place where there's appropriate habitat for all our water birds, frogs, fish. You know, these things benefit hundreds of species or more. It's really a complexity that we can't really put a value on because we don't really know the extent of it. We just get to see the wonders it produces. Wetlands need people and people need wetlands. Like, it's a reciprocal relationship, and this wouldn't have recovered and also been damaged in the first place had it not been for people. We can see what's possible out here, and we can hopefully expand that and make that happen in more wetlands, because, you know, we need wetlands and we need these species. The first year I started working out in wetlands, I was exposed to bitterns really early on. And so for me, they've been like a real mainstay in my time out in wetlands. So I'd feel a bit lost without them calling. I feel worried for their future, actually. I don't want to be in a bubble out here, because what out here is happening is really great, but I know that's not the case across the whole of the basin. So we do need to be vigilant about our wetlands and our waterbirds and the Australasian bittern. It's not saved because we have a great wetland complex out here. It's certainly helping, but it doesn't mean that it's in the clear. It takes a lot more to save a species, and it takes ongoing effort and ongoing presence of, you know, people and environmental water and healthy wetlands. So it's not a set and forget, it's, you know, it's a work in progress.